Lather, rinse, repeat.
A nice guy named Griffin took his girlfriend Stephanie on a horse ride. Suddenly Stephanie saw a bottle with a note. It turned out that Griffin had set it up on purpose to ask his sweetheart to marry him in an original way.
That's so sweet. No.
Stephanie said that they had to break up. She didn't like the fact that Griffin worked at the zoo. Stephanie hoped that Griffin could become her dream guy, but it didn't happen. 5 years have passed since then. Nothing has changed in Griffin's life. He still works at the zoo. Griffin enjoys his job because he loves animals very much. But his colleague Shane does not share this love. Moreover, he refuses to go down to the gorilla named Bernie's enclosure and feed him. 10 years ago, the animal allegedly attacked the guy. Griffin sincerely believes that trust is the most important thing in communicating with animals. He went down to Bernie's enclosure and tried to cheer him up, but the animal did not react. A young beautiful girl named Kate works as a veterinarian at the zoo. Like Griffin, she loves animals very much. Kate shared joyful news. She was invited to work in a famous zoo in Africa. Panicking zoo employees urgently brought a lioness who could not breathe to the veterinary office. Without wasting a second, Kate began to provide first aid to the big cat, and Griffin assisted her. Together they saved the poor animal. In the evening, a party was held in the zoo organized by Dave, Griffin's brother. Griffin, holding a porcupine named Floyd, made a touching speech in front of the guests. After congratulating the brother on his engagement, Griffin lost his speech when he saw his ex-girlfriend Stephanie among the guests. The guy became nervous and started stuttering. Later, Dave asked his brother directly if he still loves Stephanie. At that time, the girl was telling Robin, Dave's bride, that she feels guilty about her rude refusal 5 years ago. Stephanie thinks Griffin is a very kind guy and wants to give him another chance. Meanwhile, Dave offers his brother a better job. In his opinion, only this way can Griffin win Stephanie back. Soon the girl approached Griffin, saying that she had a new hobby, shopping. Griffin was very nervous, not knowing how to behave in the presence of his ex-girlfriend. To his surprise, Stephanie was very nice to him and asked him to arrange a tour of the zoo for her tomorrow. When she left, Griffin thought that Dave was right. He needed to change his job as soon as possible. When all the humans had left, the animals who could actually talk gathered for a meeting to discuss what had happened. Bernie has always stayed off to the side. The animals were outraged that the girl who had broken Griffin's heart 5 years ago had returned. But what worried them even more was the fact that Griffin wanted to quit the zoo. The animals were determined to help Griffin win Stephanie's affections at all costs. If they were together, then Griffin wouldn't quit the zoo. Lion Joe reminded everyone of the main rule: animals should never talk to humans. The next day, Kate watched with fondness as Griffin tried once again to cheer up Bernie. Soon Stephanie and Robin arrived, making Griffin uncomfortable. The animals began to put their plan into action. Lion Joe menacingly growled as if he were going to attack the frightened girls. Griffin rushed to their aid but fell. In the end, it was Kate who saved the girls. Joe, unable to contain his frustration, asked the guy in a human voice why he always messed up. Realizing that all the animals in the zoo could talk, Griffin screamed and ran home in a panic, locking the door. All evening he tried to recover, thinking he was going crazy. The next day, Griffin went to work, but the animals remained silent, as if nothing strange had happened.
Care to comment on that?
However, when all the zoo staff except Griffin had left, Joe spoke in a human voice again. In a panic, the guy ran but hit his head. When he woke up, the animals didn't even try to hide the fact that they could talk. Griffin wondered who had let them out of their enclosures. They told Griffin about their intention to help him win Stephanie's heart. Joe advised the guy to give in to his animal instincts, and then the girl wouldn't be able to resist him. The next day, Griffin returned to Bernie's enclosure, trying to talk to him. At first the gorilla was silent, but before Griffin left, Bernie asked him to leave his food. Meanwhile, a boy was teasing the bears, and tripping, fell into their enclosure. Griffin, who acted quickly and decisively, rescued the boy. Later, the bears advised the guy to act confidently with the girl, just as he had with them. First of all, he needed to awaken the bear inside him. The animals began to teach Griffin to walk more like a predator. Griffin started to learn the animal habits, gradually getting the hang of it. He didn't notice until late that there were many people watching him. Griffin became more intimate with Bernie. Shane interrupted them, finding it strange that his colleague was talking to someone. Later, Bernie told Griffin that he did not attack Shane 10 years ago. The fact was that Shane swung a stick at him and fell over, by making it look like he was attacked by the gorilla. More than anything in the world, Bernie wants to return to the enclosure upstairs to the other animals.
It's not my call.
The seduction lessons from the zoo animals continued. The wolf advised Griffin to mark his territory like all dogs do. Griffin was skeptical that it was a good idea, but decided to try it anyway. Kate witnessed this. Griffin was in a very awkward position. Before the party that evening, the guy marked his territory, as the wolf had advised. Dave wished his brother good luck. It turned out that another of Stephanie's ex-boyfriends, Gail, was also here. He was behaving very persistently. Stephanie clearly expected some kind of action from Griffin, but he chickened out. The animals advised him to show his rival who was in charge. Griffin decided to try to follow their advice. The next day, he rented a bike to go on a ride with Stephanie and her ex. Gail declared that Stephanie would belong only to him, but Griffin was not going to give in. In the end, Gail fell off his bike, and Griffin wanted to invite Stephanie to his brother's wedding. Unfortunately, Gail beat him to it and invited the girl first. Griffin was once again forced to turn to the animals for advice. The lioness believes that Griffin should go to the wedding with another girl to make Stephanie jealous. He turned to Kate for help, hoping that his colleague would understand and support him. Being a kind and empathetic girl, Kate agreed to help. After congratulating Bernie on his birthday and bringing him a cake, Griffin and his friend decided to leave the zoo. The guy decided to tell everyone they met on the street that they were going to a masquerade. The friends went to a popular cafe. The waitress was surprised by how realistic Bernie's costume looked. The guys had fun that evening. Bernie had never felt so happy and thanked his friend for everything. The next day, Griffin was getting ready to impress the girl of his dreams. He borrowed a cool car from a colleague so that Stephanie couldn't resist him. Seeing Kate, Griffin was delighted. The girl looked stunning. Griffin was nervous at the party because Gail was the center of attention. Seeing her ex-boyfriend with the beauty, Stephanie felt sad. Gail invited Stephanie to dance. The couple used to do ballroom dancing together, so they made a splash on the guests. Watching this, Griffin realized that his rival was better than him in everything. All the guests said that Stephanie and Gail were the perfect couple. Kate decided to help the friend and invited him to a slow dance. But even at that moment, Griffin couldn't stop looking at his ex-girlfriend. In the end, Kate managed to distract him from sad thoughts. They had a lot of fun together. Seeing them, Stephanie was jealous and angry. Later, Gail approached Griffin and told him to get lost. Then the guy started demonstrating his animal behavior. When Griffin suddenly squatted down, his pants ripped. Since Griffin had left his phone with the animals in advance, he was able to call them and tell them about his shame. Joe and the others advised him not to back down, otherwise he would lose his female. Despite his fear, Griffin approached Stephanie and began to behave very boldly. This confused the girl, as her ex-boyfriend had never acted like this before. However, she even liked it. Telling Stephanie to bring him dessert, Griffin met Gail again to let him know that the girl belonged only to him. After that, Griffin, refusing dessert and deliberately insulting Stephanie, took Kate by the hand and left the restaurant. Kate really enjoyed their time together. It turns out they make a great team. Griffin thanked his colleague for his help. Their conversation was interrupted by Stephanie, who asked Griffin to have a private talk with her. He couldn't believe that his plan had worked. Stephanie and Griffin decided to discuss their relationship at a restaurant. For the sake of his beloved, Griffin was willing to ask for time off work and go with her to the fashion show the next day. The couple visited the fashion show. Stephanie introduced Griffin to her friends. At first they made fun of him, but Griffin didn't let himself be offended and unashamedly showed off his wit. Stephanie was happy that her boyfriend was liked by her friends. She once again asked Griffin to quit his job at the zoo, as the brother has long been offering him a prestigious and well-paid job. A new life has begun for Griffin. Now he sells luxury cars at his brother's firm and is a very successful person. One day, Griffin returned to the zoo. He never told Kate that he didn't just go on vacation, but planned to quit. Finally, Griffin found the strength to confess. In Griffin's opinion, he had no prospects at the zoo. Kate immediately understood that this decision was influenced by Stephanie, as Griffin loves his job and the animals very much. Griffin realizes that this is self-deception, but he doesn't change his mind. He went to say goodbye to Bernie. The gorilla was very upset because Griffin almost convinced him that not all people are traitors. Griffin had no choice but to leave. But before that, the guy threatened Shane that if he harms any of the animals again, he will regret it. Now Griffin has a completely different life, but he can't stop longing for his job at the zoo. Animals also miss him very much, as he took care of them for 8 years, and that time was the best. Kate confessed to Venom that she's also quitting the zoo tomorrow. She used to turn down an offer to work in the African Wildlife Refuge because she fell in love with someone here, But now there's nothing keeping her here anymore. Venom decided that Kate meant him, but Kate laughed and said she meant Griffin. After a tiring day at work, Griffin returned home. Stephanie talked nonstop, but he wasn't interested in her empty conversations. Stephanie is obsessed with her appearance, and her interests are limited to parties. Despite Griffin's warning, Shane was up to his old tricks again. Meanwhile, Stephanie showed up at her beloved's work, saying that she made a mistake on the beach 5 years ago, but wants to make it right. Stephanie asked Griffin to marry her.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
He didn't want to become the guy of her dreams and spend his whole life working the job he hates. Griffin went back to the zoo and asked Bernie for forgiveness for his mistake. Bernie told him that Kate quit and is leaving for Africa today. To catch her at the airport, Griffin and Bernie stole a car. However, Griffin first visited Shane and punished him for what he did to Bernie. Fortunately, they made it in time. Bernie advised his friend to be himself, because that's all that matters. Griffin told Kate that he realized his mistake. It took him 5 years to forget the girl he never loved, but he could never forget Kate. They kissed. 6 months passed. Now Bernie isn't sitting in the cage downstairs and is enjoying life with the rest of the animals.